Hello, I am Jack Bolello, the guest host for The Writer's Dream today. And the reason I'm the guest host is because our normal and usual host, Linda Frank, will be the interviewee because she has just published her fourth book, The Mystery of the Lost Adventure. And it's a lot to talk about because there's so much to it that it's my pleasure to be the interviewer for this program. Linda, I wanted to start off by saying, as fellow writers, we both are writers, one of the things that most people will ask a writer is, why do you write? What is the impulse that you got into writing for?
Thank you for being the host. I'm usually the host. This is very weird for me, I want you to know. I think that I was a kid who hated to write. I got into high school and they would say, write a composition on green. And I would say, what? But what happens is you become a teacher. We have that in common. You're a teacher too. And you end up doing so much writing. Curriculum, lesson plans. And my philosophy in life has always been, let's have fun. So if you want to make a fun lesson, you really have to do a little research. And I ended up doing a lot of writing. I used to write little things about, I would have a little thing I would put on the bulletin board, chemistry student of the month, and I would pick some poor kid and make up a complete story about them. That became something that I enjoyed. And then I started to teach forensic science. And as a kid, I loved Nancy Drew. And forensic science was so much fun to teach that I decided, okay, let me see if I can write a book. And I was on vacation and I bought a Nancy Drew. I mean, I read them all when I was a kid, but I bought one and I read it. And I also read a couple of other mystery stories that were written for kids. And I said, you know, I can do this. And so I started the Annie Tillery Mystery Series. The first book was The Madonna Ghost. And The Madonna Ghost takes place on Fire Island. And what you do when you write, I think most authors do, is they try to put in the experiences they've had in their life, and the characters are people you knew, and you thought, gee, this person would make a great, character. There's one character in that book who was actually somebody I taught with, and I pretty accurately described him. And then I went on to Girl with Pencil Drawing, which takes place in Brooklyn, and that's about art forgery, which is a very timely topic today. And then Secrets in the Fairy Chimneys takes place in Turkey in an archaeological dig. The best part about that book was I got to go to Turkey to do the research. I shouldn't say it was the best part, but anyway. And then the latest one is The Mystery of the Lost Avenger. That takes place here on Long Island, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, The Mystery of the Lost Avenger to me is fascinating because you have been able to do something that authors, I think, are very, very important in the construction of a novel. You have been able to feel comfortable in two worlds. And the flashback, I think, is something that you use very effectively, and I have tried to do that in a couple of my novels, too. The flashback enables you to live in the past and the present. For example, I don't know if you're familiar with this, you may not be, but there is an outstanding series on television in which the flashback is utilized fantastically. It's called, The Outlander.
Oh, the Outlander series. I've heard of it.
Oh, you've heard of it. Good. And in the Outlander series, you will see that they are flashing back to really the 1740s in Scotland, but the flashback comes to contemporary times. Well, in this case, it was 1945. And it was done very, very beautifully and effectively. And so do you in The Mystery of the Lost Avenger. And the thing that I thought was exceptional was how you were able to bring forth the interest and the importance and the drama of history. Can you tell us how that came about?
Well, that's something that, you can't take the teacher out of the writer, I guess. All of my books have history, mystery, and science. And in this particular book, I'll tell you what really inspired me to write this book. I went to the Cradle of Aviation Museum. I've been there many, many times. My son lives in Maryland. He comes to visit with his family, and he he's a military history buff, especially airplanes. So, of course, Memorial Day, we go to the Jones Beach Air Show. We go often to Republic Airport. They're always having something on display there. That's the American Air Power Museum. And then we were in the Cradle of Aviation Museum, and it was one of those days where you could sit in the simulators, sit in the airplanes, and they were doing something, and I was wandering around, and I wander up to this plane, and of course when you see the planes, these fighter planes from World War II or the bombers or whatever, not the bombers so much, but they look so small, but then when you're right next to them, they're huge. So I walk up to this blue plane, this dark navy blue plane, and there's a plaque there, and the plaque talks about how this plane was not only built by the Rosie the Riveters, who are actually, some of them still alive and being interviewed today, but also they were tested because there were no men. All of the men were overseas, so they didn't have enough men to be test pilots. And also they flew the planes to the aircraft carriers in the Pacific where they fought the war. And these women were called WASPs, which stands for Women's Air Service Pilots. So I'm seeing this, and I'm of course, I'm a bit of a feminist, and I decided to climb into the plane. So I climb into the cockpit, and I was very proud of myself that I could do this because it wasn't easy. And I'm sitting in the cockpit, and this feeling came over me. You talk about inspiration and ghosts and spirits and whatnot. And all I can think of is, I have to write this story. I have to find a way to write the story of these women. And that was the inspiration for the book. And I ended up doing a lot of research. I went to the Cradle of Aviation Museum, and I met the archivists. And the archives in the Cradle of Aviation Museum are one of the old Mitchell Field hangars. A lot of the stuff that I looked at was online. I could get it online, but it's one thing to look at it on the computer. It's another thing to sift through these piles and piles of stuff. And I actually was able to open the blueprints for this airplane, and it was wonderful. It just gave me such a feeling of being there, and I guess maybe that translated into the book.
Very good. And that you mentioned that. One of the things that struck me was Andy Tillery, who is the protagonist of all of your novels.
She's my Nancy.
She's your Nancy Drew. When she was trying to get aboard Ty, her boyfriend's plane, she was afraid she was going to break the wing if she stepped on the wing. And you kind of described that. How do I get on this plane? Is that But one of the things that I really, really was taken with was the role of women. Very little known or appreciated. Not only Rosie the Riveter, and by the way, women who were Rosie the Riveters did a better job than men because their fingers were smaller. They were able to put the rivets in more effectively and soundly.
And faster.
Faster. As a matter of fact, it was like a 2-to-1 ratio. For every 2 rivets that the women put in, a man on the defense assembly line only could put 1. They did twice the work at half the pay, even then.
Yes,
and that's
even
still
then.
an issue in our current society. And the role of the women's auxiliary service pilots was not that well known. Jackie Cochran being one of the pioneers in this effort. Most people don't know that 20,000 women applied for this women's air service pilot position. Only 1,900 were accepted. 38 were killed in the role.
And do you ever hear about that?
And you don't hear, but not only were they killed in this non-combat role, during World War II, there were almost 15,000 airmen and women killed in this country in training.
Yeah.
Of the 80,000 killed in combat overall in Europe and the Pacific, 15,000 were killed in training accidents in this country during World War II. And women, when those who were killed, one, they would never came back home in a flag-draped coffin. That was not allowed. 2, taps was not allowed because they were never buried in military cemeteries. Then when the war ended, they were disbanded and had to go home on their own. They were not even given the courtesy of that kind of transport given to all the men who fought in World War II. So there's some really things that people should know about, which I think you have paved the way for in this novel. they were not recognized for their role.
I know.
Believe it or not, until President Obama.
And then,
President Obama recognized them
That's
by
right.
giving the remaining ones who were able to come, and you have some air ladies in there who are telling their story, and it wasn't until 2010 that they were given the Congressional Gold Medal for their role in the war.
And
so
they're-
this is very important, I think, as a component of your novel.
and there is a museum now at the entrance to Arlington Cemetery that is dedicated to women in the armed services over the years. And of course, at the end of World War II, they were told to go home and take care of their husbands and not take jobs away from men.
Yes.
So, thank you.
No,
Thank you very
Wait a
much.
minute, I
No,
had
not-
nothing to
no,
do
no,
with it.
not you, but you know what I'm saying. But essentially, the book is a ghost story. My main character has, she has a mother who has a substance abuse problem, and growing up, she really never had a close relationship with her mother. But it's her mother who receives a letter from NCIS, from Naval Intelligence, that they have found a plane crash in Appalachia, and the plane is an Avenger. And they know that the plane crashed during World War II. The plane went missing, so they knew what the plane was, and of course they found the remains of the pilot. But they want to know why the plane crashed. Of course they want to know. Every cold case, especially in the military, you learn from it. They want to know they always wanted to know what happened to the plane. During wartime, there would be all kinds of theories of what happened to the plane. So her mother gets this letter, and of course she brings it to Annie. Annie lives with her aunt, who's a New York City police detective, and her father works for the State Department. He's stationed in Istanbul. So they all come together and they talk about this letter and what it means. They know it's not a relative of Annie's great-grandmother, but what happens is the NCIS tells Annie's mother that there was a note left in the plane, and it was written on a form, like a punch list form from Grumman, and it had Annie's great-grandmother's number on it. So they traced it to her, so they wanted to investigate that angle. And that's how Annie gets involved in this. And she begins to realize that this is her DNA, that she didn't know anything about her grandmother or her great-grandmother because she has no relationship, or a very tenuous relationship, with her mother. So in this book, she reestablishes a relationship with her mother, which I thought was important. And yeah, I do go back and forth. I had fun with that. It was fun going back to the 1940s.
Yeah.
Because I got a lot of pictures, and everybody's smoking. So of course kids play with smoking, and so Annie says at one point in the book, look at them, they're doing advertisements for Camel cigarettes, and Annie's mother explains, well, it was very glamorous to smoke. Women imitated how Marlene Dietrich, would blow cigarette smoke out of her mouth. And then there's that famous line from Betty Davis, Peter, give me the letter. So I had a lot of fun with going back in
Puff
time.
of smoke. And here we have four of the
Yes,
the
the wasps.
fine ladies, the
Yeah.
members of the WASP service, and here's the pistol pilot Mama. Is the plane, it looks like a B-24 in back of them, or B-17, but either one was one of the sturdy workhorses of World War II. And here they are, young, pretty, the world in front of them. And
Yes.
some of them never got back, including, World War II, the role of women. Many Army nurses were killed
Right.
in World War II. They were right in the combat zone. The aid stations only 100 to 200 yards behind the front lines. And any time there was a barrage, an artillery barrage, they were in harm's way. And many Army nurses were killed in combat areas during World War II. So that is something that you have brought to us, and I think very, very, very important. Now, in one part of the novel, Aunt Jay, who is Annie's Jill.
Aunt.
Aunt.
Aunt Jill, yeah.
Aunt Jill, but they call her Jay in the novel, I noticed.
Yeah.
And Carol, Annie's mother, asks Jill, do you believe in ghosts? And she says, I don't know. Well, let me ask you this question, Linda Frank. Since a ghost is so important in this story, do you believe in ghosts?
That's a question.
No hedging, no
No,
fudging.
no. No, I'm not going to do what the politicians do, answer another question. I'll answer this question. But it's a very important and interesting question to me because I actually believe anything is possible. I have a science background. I taught chemistry, biology, and other things as well. And the current theories in science, like string theory, which string theory basically says that energy exists as these little vibrating strings, whatever that means. I don't really understand it very well. Someday I'm going to delve into it, but what it really comes up with is that there are many more dimensions that exist that we are not in touch with than we know about. So here are these extra dimensions. Well, what's in those dimensions? And then there's also quantum mechanics, which talks about the probability of where an electron is at any one given time. All of this current science, what cosmologists do and astrophysicists, they're learning things about the universe that enable us to think that there's a whole lot more out there than we know about matter and antimatter. So Linda Frank says, anything's possible.
Okay, that's fair enough.
And then, of course, my religious beliefs point me in the direction of there is an afterlife. I believe in an afterlife. Maybe there isn't. Maybe I'm going to get a big shock. But it's really, you know, if you
If there isn't, you won't know about it.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It'll be just, thanks. But, you know, I think about what's going to happen to a person. You think about any given person. You're not just a lump of clay. You know, we are our cells and how our body functions. But there's all that stuff that goes on in your brain. And my brain's different from yours. Not the structure. It's all the same. But what's packed in there and how it collides together to form Linda Frank is different from Jack Bolello. What happens to that when you die? I mean, I have seen people after they have died. I've seen dead bodies, okay? And you look at them and you realize, and if you've ever seen anyone die, the change that occurs in the organic mass that is that body is a little stunning to me because it is a change. And I cannot believe that what makes you you goes away, and I can't snap my fingers, but I love to, like that, poof, you're dead, and all of that accumulated while you were alive is gone. I can't believe that. So I believe in ghosts.
As Woody Allen says, the toughest thing for him to comprehend is that he will vanish for eternity.
So, he will vanish for eternity.
eternity.
That's a little
I
too
don't want to
deep.
think about
That's
that.
too deep
That's
for
a little
me.
too deep.
That's too
But
deep for me.
Linda, you taught at Seaford.
I did.
And one of the alumni at Seaford High School was a gentleman by the name of Jim Valvano.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Valvano went on to play basketball at Seaford, went to, I believe, Iona College, then became coach at Iona, then became coach of an 1A basketball team, North Carolina State Wolfpack. He won the national championship, the pinnacle, the height of any
Right.
college coach's ambition in the
One of the
accomplishment.
gymnasiums in Seaford is named after him.
Named after him, yes, okay. But he never really had time to savor